in an ambitious bid to rival global naval powers. Recently, China launched its Fujian Type 003 aircraft carrier, envisioned as majestic symbols of its burgeoning maritime supremacy. Yet, far from being triumphant marvels, this carrier has devolved into glaring emblems of China's overreached ambitions and profound technological inadequacies, so much so that their sea trials keep being postponed. We can see it through Chinese propaganda on Beidou that China carrier surpasses America, that this ship is so advanced that America admires this level of technology. Not only that, China also claims that with the success of Type 003, Type 004 completely dominates the USA. But this is far from the truth. Beset by a series of calamitous failures, from the glaring imitation of foreign technologies to internal political turmoil, these vessels reflected deep-seated crisis in China's military-industrial complex. The story of the Type 003 and Type 004 carriers are not merely one of delayed projects or technical glitches. It's a dramatic saga of a nation's hubris, misjudgments, and the stark gap between its lofty ambitions and the grim reality of its capabilities. This narrative serves as a sobering reminder of the perils of overestimating one's own strength and the pitfalls of chasing global dominance on an unstable foundation of copied technologies and political showmanship. Issues facing China's third and fourth carriers. The Type 003 carriers were meant to spearhead China's ascendancy as a naval power on the world stage. Instead, they now epitomize the void between the regime's lofty ambitions and actual capabilities. The Fujian ship's deck even has cracks on it. The Type 003 was unveiled over 500 days ago, yet remains embarrassingly landlocked. Its much-touted maiden voyage during occasions from Army Day to the National Day celebrations have come and gone. Empty promises of deadlines now mock the CCP's craving for global prestige. At the heart of the Type 003's stasis lies the electromagnetic catapult, a next-generation aircraft launch system that China brazenly copied from the U.S. Navy's Ford-class carriers, but replicating advanced technology proves much easier than innovating or operationalizing it. Beijing's approach was to brazenly copy the electromagnetic launch systems from America's state-of-the-art Ford-class carriers, but adopting foreign technology does not equate to mastering it. Bereft of the expertise and experience required to operate and maintain the complex catapult infrastructure. CCP engineers have scrambled to reverse engineer their own versions with disastrous outcomes. The crash priority placed on replicating and innovating the advanced catapults meant that the technology was integrated well before it was ready. The result has been systematic setbacks during shore-based testing, from scarcity of specialized alloys and circuitry due to Western sanctions to catastrophic failures damaging equipment and deadly mishaps causing casualties. Multiplicer accounts point to likely irredeemable design flaws that intrinsically limit the reliability, durability, and performance of the copied systems. Particular reports indicate that due to differences in strength of materials compared to U.S. carriers, the catapults suffer from overload failures whenever operated at the speeds required for an actual carrier launch. Exacerbating matters, there are suggestions the entire electromagnetic catapult system was primarily based on concepts from an undergraduate thesis paper that outlined a theoretical design. Absent the subsequent decades of practical experimentation and incremental enhancements undertaken by the U.S. Navy, the catapults onboard the Type 003 seem to fatally lack robustness and resilience needed for sustained operations. Making matters worse, the lead scientist overseeing the ASC-22X carrier program was mysteriously removed from a recent CCP party congress. Mission from the pivotal political event signals disgrace and raises deeper questions concerning failings of the electromagnetic catapults that now imperil the combat potential of Beijing's new flagship naval vessel. The CCP's crash program to incorporate and scale immature technologies has been disastrous, causing systematic delays from material shortages, testing accidents, and basic design flaws. The homemade catapults now face possibly irredeemable issues around lethal overload failures, damaged launch infrastructure, and severely limited aircraft compatibility. Prospects for the Type 004 carrier appear even bleaker. As the intended crown jewel of China's carrier fleet, the 100,000-ton nuclear-powered vessel was slated to finally rival American supremacy. But the CICP regime vastly overestimated its technological capabilities and economic bandwidth. Years behind schedule, the Type 004 carrier remains trapped in the conception phase. From integrating scaled-up nuclear reactors to advanced catapult systems, China lacks the technical expertise, foreign assistance, or financial resources to actualize its ambitions. The Type 003 and 004 carriers were to herald China's coming of age as a naval superpower. Instead, they now epitomize the growing chasm between the CCP's global ambitions and actual capabilities. Broader naval development issues. Beyond high-profile debacles like the Type 003 carrier, deeper dysfunction plagues the development of China's naval forces. Systemic deficiencies in technical expertise, economic resources, and strategic planning bedevil Beijing's ambitions of maritime dominance. On the technology front, China lacks meaningful experience with key capabilities like aircraft carrier operation, jet engine development, and naval nuclear propulsion. Attempts at shortcuts via espionage and reverse engineering have hit intrinsic barriers, with Western sanctions explicitly targeting its military-industrial complex. Beijing can neither buy nor steal its way to naval supremacy. Economic realities have also clipped the CCP's wings amidst a period of financial volatility. With vast sums invested in strategic distractions like the BRI program, the regime has limited bandwidth to fund sophisticated weapons programs that require long timelines before yielding to turn capabilities. The limitations afflict even China's existing Soviet-era carriers. Poor quality control means key components like hull casing arrive defective to shipyards, necessitating extensive repairs. Such intrinsic flaws make the carriers more suited for propaganda than naval warfare. Humiliations have compounded frustrations over equipment dysfunction. Recent provocative maneuvers by advanced U.S. carrier groups have elicited no response from Beijing's naval forces. While Chinese citizens endure bellicose rhetoric about resisting foreign enemies, their navy stumbles when actually confronted by them. Ultimately, paper tiger carriers serve little military purpose, but provide an easy vehicle for the CCP's brand of nationalism and distraction. With deck space increasingly devoted to civilian amenities from shops to lounges, China's naval prowess often seems more commercial cruise liner than combat fleet. Political drama behind the scenes. The CCP's aircraft carrier program has become embroiled in factional party politics as much as engineering practicalities. While the vessels serve as important symbols for China's global ascendancy, they have also exposed latent tensions within the Beijing elite. President Xi has hitched his personal prestige to the success of the carrier fleet. The recent launches were meant to culminate in celebrations that cemented his status as the champion behind China's rise as a naval power. Domestic propaganda extravagantly branded the Type 003 carrier as Xi's personal embodiment. Its eventual maiden voyage Otilla, timed to coincide with the critical party Congress event that reaffirmed his unprecedented third term. That such carefully orchestrated theater has collapsed as inauguration dates for showcase vessels repeatedly pass without fanfare. Instead, persistent delays and scandals have become political ammunition for rival factions seeking to undermine Xi's authority. Opponents have exploited policy missteps to fuel unflattering comparisons to Mao's past naval boondoggle. Rather than illustrations of Chinese military prowess, the dysfunctional carriers now stoke fears that national resources are being drained on extortionate vanity projects at a time of economic uncertainty, inviting unflattering parallels to crises that precipitated regime change historically. The optics debacle has seen Xi simmering at compromises forced to dampen further embarrassment. Not only have promises to unveil carriers by key dates proven fanciful, but petty concessions have had to be made on how the vessels project his personal brand, from names that trumpet his legacy to inaugural ceremonies suited to his protocol preferences. Checks remain on Xi's ability to milk the troubled carriers for propagandistic gain. Uncertainties around 004 carrier. The Type 004 aircraft carrier was envisioned as the culminating vessel that would cement China's status as America's peer adversary in the Pacific. As the planned successor to the troubled Type 003, already struggling with catapult integration, the 100,000-ton Leviathan would dwarf rival ships and project uncontestable military power abroad. But years after announcing the project, Beijing continues struggling to articulate any coherent blueprint for the Type 004 amidst chronic capability gaps, disappearing budgets, and strategic ambiguity. As prospects for the supercarrier dim, China risks permanently ceding any advantages from getting such large vessels operational before peer adversaries. A host of complex integration hurdles around propulsion and launch capabilities continue thwarting progress on the Type 004 carrier. China lacks experience building and operating naval nuclear reactors powerful enough to generate 100+ MW of electricity needed for the immense ship's combat systems and catapults. Its engineers also face compatibility issues planning a hybrid steam electromagnetic aircraft launch suite when they struggle with just copying baseline U.S. electromagnetic technology alone. Beijing unable to rely on foreign assistance due to increasing international sanctions and export controls. These hardware bottlenecks have indefinitely delayed any progress on the Type 004. China's military-industrial complex lacks the indigenous research and production infrastructure in areas like radiation shielding, weapons-grade propulsion, and precision aircraft launch gear that could facilitate developing a supercarrier on its own. Equally concerning is ambiguity on whether Beijing retains any strategic appetite for an adversarial naval arms race that prompted pursuing 100,000-ton supercarriers designed foremost to outmatch the U.S. Navy's capabilities. The changing calculus reflects both China's economic travails as growth forecasts dim, squeezing military budgets needed to operate future vessels, as well as increasingly conciliatory rhetoric on U.S.-China relations by Xi Jinping as he engineers an unprecedented third leadership term. Without steadfast political commitment and funded institutional momentum, the Type 004 risks being endlessly deferred as yet another symbolic distraction rather than purposeful investment in expanding naval power projection. The further timelines slip without progress. The advantages accrue disproportionately to rival forces who continue operating and iteratively perfecting more modest but functional carrier groups operationalized years ago. For all the fanfare and resources poured into prestige vessels like the Type 003, fundamental questions loom over what China's aircraft carriers are meant to achieve from a strategic standpoint. That beyond projecting naval power abroad, evidence points to the carriers serving more as props for nationalist myth-making at home. The constant propaganda about an imposing carrier fleet seems explicitly meant to intimidate China's own population rather than rival militaries who remain undeterred. Displays of naval might substitute for genuine military capabilities that still remain lacking compared to Beijing's ambitions. But maintaining such a symbolic illusion risks trapping China in an arms race where adversaries operate on real capabilities rather than theatrical jests. The more Beijing doubles down on impractical supercarriers, the more likely it gets entangled in a spiral of reactionary defense spending with peer adversaries. The greatest danger remains that rising jingoism at home drives policies abroad while perpetuating a false sense of Chinese naval supremacy. The CCP risks dragging the nation into reckless military overreach, as facts on the ground about naval preparedness remain misaligned from fiction used to stoke patriotic fervor. Ultimately, China may end up compromising its long-term development trajectory by pouring resources into floating vanity projects rather than uplifting its population mired in economic anxiety. Paper tiger carriers have become symbols of strategic myopia, where the CCP prioritizes its own survival above nation building.